My name is attorney Wendy Guthro. I'm a licensed attorney in both the great Commonwealth of Massachusetts and the state of New Hampshire. Today is November 20th, 2024. All of the information I'm providing in this presentation is based upon the law as it is as of today. There's a chat feature on this presentation that if you would like to put any of questions you might have in the chat feature as we go along, then we can answer those questions in a designated question and answer period. Let me go ahead and start a screen share. Okay. Today's presentation is the financial and legal strategies for long-term care. This is the overview that was up on the screen when many of you joined us. We're going to have this roadmap of really talking initially about what is long-term care, what are the options for long-term care from a monetary perspective, a location perspective, and then we're going to talk about different options that might suit you. We're then going to go into Medicaid eligibility because primarily for long-term care, you're either going to be privately paying or taking advantage of the government plan under Mass Health Medicaid long-term care. So there's some planning that needs to be done, but I am going to go into some detail on long-term care planning in the event you would like the government to pay for your care. We're then going to go into legal documents that I would like for you to have in place for long-term care in advance. We'll talk about some of the financial planning that's available for long-term care. And as I said, we'll go into the conclusions and next steps and followed by a question and answer session that I will try to take some of your questions and answers. I am not providing any legal advice. I am simply giving some educational materials. So I need you to understand that you have not retained me as your attorney and that this presentation is simply for informational purposes. As I said, I'm Wendy Guthro. I'm authorized to practice law in both Massachusetts and New Hampshire. My main areas of focus are estate planning, elder law, probate, and trust administration. And I'm a member of the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys. Right into the presentation, the importance of planning for long-term care. There's three main factors of why we are doing some planning. One, there's a growing need to do planning because 70% of all people over the age of 65 will require long-term care at some point in their life. There's a financial impact. It's a very high cost. If you're doing care within the home environment, you're normally starting out in about the $7,000 range. If you're bringing in some type of nursing care or even certified nursing assistant care primarily, and then all the way up to about $15,000 a month if you're doing care in a facility. So we want to plan to either self-fund, meaning you're privately paying for your care, or if you're not going the self-funding route, we are looking at doing a 5-year look-back period when we're going to be using the government plan. The emotional burden. So not only do more people need it and it's costly, there is an emotional burden that is put on the person that is needing long-term care as well as the family. And in my practice, I find that many families are unprepared for the struggles that ensue when you have to make a decision of what are we going to do for someone's long-term care when they're in a crisis. So I love the idea of at least trying to think, what is going to be our plan? If one or both of us, if you're married, if you're a single person, I want you to start thinking about what is your plan if you do need long-term care. And that the other benefit of planning is that it does ensure in most cases that your wishes are going to be respected. Some wishes are that you want to be cared for at home. Another wish might be that you would like to use a lot of your financial resources to maybe be placed into an assisted living facility and then privately pay for care by bringing in certified nursing assistants to provide additional care. So, if you can start to think about that, a third factor of the importance of planning is that there is an emotional burden on all parties involved. So, let's see if we can put a plan together in place to kind of reduce this crisis situation and that we have a plan in place to ensure that our wishes are carried out. Long-term care options. We're going to talk about the overview of the care settings and then the considerations for choosing the best care option for your situation. I want to start with defining what long-term care is actually. And this definition is taken from a lot of long-term care insurance providers. So if you have long-term care insurance, most insurance policies require that you need help with at least two out of six activities of daily living. There's actually a more robust list of about 14 activities of daily living, but most insurance companies have these six as what you will need, at least needing help with two of them. Washing yourself, bathing, dressing yourself, feeding yourself, toileting yourself, making transfers normally from a bed to a chair, and then ambulating, moving yourself from one location to another. So I think it's important to keep this in mind that you and I, as regular citizens, are really thinking, well, long-term care is when I can't do things for myself, but that there is legal definitions depending upon who is defining that and what services you're looking for. This definition also applies if you're looking to go into long-term care into a facility, that they are looking for that you need help with activities of daily living. The care that you need can be administered in a number of settings. Here are the top four. An in-home environment, which we refer to as aging in place. And what most people really want, they want to, provide care in a home environment for as long as possible. A second care setting is an adult daycare facility. It's normally a day program, and it's that you are living most of your life, your sleeping hours in your home environment, but that either a van or a loved one will take you to an adult daycare, that they are providing oversight in a safe environment for you to be in. That can be on a temporary basis or even on a respite basis. If maybe you have a family that's just got to be away for during the day, or they need maybe they're going to go have an inpatient or an outpatient, medical program or medical facility, that you're needing care for just the day for a medical reason, that you could ask your loved one to go to an adult daycare facility. The third one is an assisted living facility. This is also oftentimes coupled with independent living. So we'll have an assisted living facility that has independent living, assisted living, as well as memory care living, oftentimes in the same facility. But for long-term care settings, we're really focusing on the assisted living facility when you need assistance or you need memory care. The fourth environment is a nursing home, also referred to as a skilled nursing facility. So these are the top four settings that your long-term care takes place in. Let's talk about the costs associated with long-term care, and they vary based upon the setting that you're in. These are approximate costs per month in the Boston area as of 2024. In-home care, I added the precursor that this is care provided by home health aides, that someone needs care pretty much for 8 to 10 hours a day, and that care will cost you normally just for 20 days per month. Sometimes the weekends can be covered as well. And the care comes in at about $7,500 per month. An adult daycare, because it's simply a day program, there's no overnights here, you are looking at about $3,000, $2,650 or up to $3,000 a month. And that care is normally provided just Monday through Friday. An assisted living facility. Again, this is not independent, but assisted. It normally includes 45 minutes to 1 hour of nursing or CNA assistance per day, even on the weekends. It could be you need medication reminders, you might need some assistance with bathing, or you might just need some assistance with moving some things from maybe some shopping you've done into your cabinets, things like that. So that is assisted living facilities, and that's coming in starting in the range of about $5,000 a month. But once you're in there at 5,000, I see most facilities have substantial increases every year. So a client I just had, they started at about 6,500 a month, and in the second year, they were bumped up to $7,400 a month. So if you are going to be looking for care in an assisted living facility, you do want to get a good sense from the facilities on what an annual increase would be in your rent. And then the last is the nursing home or a skilled nursing facility. On average, they're running between $14,000 and $15,000 per month in the Boston area. Considerations for choosing the best care option. I would say 100% of you would say to me, if you had a choice, you would not like to be cared for in a skilled nursing facility. So you really have to look at what is the level of care that you require, because that is really what determines whether you have to go into a skilled nursing facility. Because if you have a low level of care, then it's easy to be cared for at home, even in an assisted living facility. But if your care reaches the level that is beyond the staffing ability at an assisted living facility, and you might not have enough money to maybe bring in private nursing to aid in your care at the assisted living facility, then you might need to move to a skilled nursing facility to get that highest level of care. Your budget and your cost of care is going to be completely dependent upon the best location for you to receive your care. The location and the accessibility normally of if your family is all located in one area, then you're really not going to want to go to any of the facilities that are further away. So, and then the accessibility that if you have a spouse that's at home and that they don't drive, that you're really going to want to make sure that there's accessibility for your spouse to come visit you, or a family member if you're single or not married. So location and accessibility drive where you will get your care. And then lifestyle and independence. An assisted living facility has a certain lifestyle. An assisted living facility is really based on a social model. There is a tremendous amount of independence there, versus when you transition to a skilled nursing facility, you're not going to have that same flexibility that you might have had, or that same lifestyle that you would have had in an assisted living. Because when we move into a skilled nursing environment, we are really there for medical care. We have left the social model of care that also tends to some of your long-term care needs. And we've really moved into the medical model that your medical care is paramount. Now, the level of care required, if you are going to be aging in place in the home environment, you need to think about if your care is rising to a level that you normally, under your current situation, cannot get the care you need in the home environment, such as if you really did need around-the-clock nursing and you are going to bring in nursing services or skilled nursing assistant, and you're going to need someone to move in with you, that person moving in will need their own bedroom. so that you do need to provide or modify your home environment so that you can give that nursing staff the requirements for 24/7 care in the home environment. So we've talked about the definition of long-term care from kind of a clinical perspective, and that we've talked about, different costs and what are the factors that will allow you to either age in place or go into an assisted living or go into skilled nursing. So now we're going to talk about your medical eligibility and asset planning. So now that we know what some of the costs are associated with it, we're going to do an overview of the Medicaid rules and the application process if you would like to take advantage of the government plan. And then we're going to roll into some strategies to structure your assets to qualify for Medicaid. I would like to remind you or tell you for the first time, if you've never heard this, that Medicaid is the name of the federal program that we use to help people that don't have enough money to pay for their health care, and that includes their long-term care. In Massachusetts, that program is called Mass Health. So Medicaid is the federal program. Each state has their own name for it. Some just use Medicaid. Massachusetts has chosen to use Mass Health. Under the Mass Health program, there are many different types of programs. If you just need your health insurance covered, but you don't need long-term care, but maybe you need long-term care. Are you going to have it provided in the home environment? That might be a waiver program. If you're going to have it provided in a skilled nursing facility, that will be long-term care in a skilled nursing facility. And each one of those programs has different qualifications. This presentation is going to stay focused if you need Medicaid, Mass Health in the institutional setting, in a skilled nursing facility. But many of the things I'm going to discuss do also apply if you want care in the home environment, and then you might transfer later on to a skilled nursing facility if you can no longer get the care you need delivered in the home environment. So, an overview of the Medicaid rules and application process. The first thing I'd like you to understand is that Mass Health breaks it up into two different buckets: your income bucket and your asset. And these two columns review that in determining an applicant's financial eligibility, Mass Health looks at the individual's income and assets. Social Security, dividends, pensions, any rental income you might get from a rental property, that would be considered your income. Assets, cash, mutual funds, automobiles, real estate, retirement accounts, whole life insurance policies, second homes, valuables, multiple cars, boats, things like that. So this will help you understand the rules better if you can at least remember that when you're trying to figure out whether you would qualify for Mass Health, you need to figure out, well, how about the income and how about my assets? Income is not nearly as scrutinized when you're going into a skilled nursing home versus if you're in the home environment. So income, there are no income thresholds for nursing home residents. So if you get Social Security and a pension and you're coming in at about $5,000 a month and you need to go into a skilled nursing facility, you will be allowed to qualify to get in if you have $5,000 in income. Your income is going to be paid towards the monthly costs minus some health insurance deductions and some premium deductions for health insurance, as well as you're allowed to keep $72.80 per month for your personal needs from that $5,000. All the remaining amount is going to be paid to the nursing home to lower the amount of money that the government is going to have to pay the nursing home for your care. We're going to the second column now, which is assets. The nursing home applicant is allowed to have $2,000 to their name if they are a single applicant, single individual, and going into a skilled nursing facility. Additionally, though, if you're a married applicant with a spouse living in the community, the spouse is allowed to keep up to, under current numbers, about $155,000 in countable assets. So if you go to this column of cash, mutual funds, real estate, retirement accounts, whole life insurance, these, except for an automobile, all can be kept for as long as they total to $154,000, $140,000 or less. And then the person going into the nursing home is allowed to keep $2,000 in assets. So again, the income category, it doesn't really matter so much if you're going into a skilled nursing facility. No matter how much money you have, they'll take you, and that there are some deductions to the amount of income. And then the assets is $2,000 for the applicant and about $155,000 for the community spouse. And the reasoning behind that is that they do not want to impoverish the community spouse because they need to still maintain themselves in the home environment. And also on this income, if there is a community spouse, that not all of your $5,000 might be put toward your nursing home care. If your community spouse doesn't earn enough income, I think it's at about $3,000 they're at least allowed to keep of either their own income, or if their own income isn't enough, then they will use some of the money, the income from the nursing home residents' money to hold on to not impoverish them so they can sustain themselves in the home environment. The next big thing that I'm going to communicate is non-countable assets. And I'm going to spend a little time on this because many people want to know, is it only $155,000 and $2,000? So for the rest of this, we'll say $157,000 that a married couple is allowed to have. But if you're not married, you're only allowed to have $2,000. But here are other things you're allowed to have. They're referred to as non-countable assets. A principal residence in Massachusetts. You're allowed to have household belongings and furnishings. You're allowed to have personal belongings, clothing, jewelry, furniture. You're allowed to have burial plots for the applicant and members of your family. You are allowed to prepay irrevocable burial contracts. Very often when I'm doing a spend down, we're suggesting that you go to pre-plan and prepay your funerals. We have a $1,500 burial bank account for miscellaneous funeral and burial expenses. You can have term, group, or other life insurance policies that have no cash surrender value. Those are normally referred to as term policies, as it says in number 7. Term, group, or other life insurance policies that have no cash value. Life insurance policies with face values totaling up to $1,500, regardless of their cash surrender values. And you're allowed to have one automobile for use by the applicant, the nursing home applicant, or their family. So even if a nursing home applicant doesn't drive, but their spouse drives or a family member drives and they need to go and visit the nursing home applicant, or they just need to go and get them things, that you are allowed to have an automobile in the name of the applicant, but that could be used by their family. There are special rules for the primary residence. So this was the principal residence in Massachusetts was the first non-countable asset. So Mass Health will treat the equity in an applicant's home up to $1,071,000 as a non-countable asset. So if you have a married couple and they own a home and the value of the home is less than the $1,071,000 in 2024, then that house will be considered a non-countable asset as long as you have two spouses alive and only one of them is going into a skilled nursing facility. Now, Mass Health may place a lien on the property for services rendered. So if you're in the facility for 1 year and Mass Health has spent $150,000 on your care, well, Mass Health is allowed to place a lien on property. Say if you're a single individual and you've still gotten approved from Mass Health because you're allowed to still own a home, but they are going to place a lien on it if you're a single individual up to the value of the amount of services they've rendered for you. And then any remaining balance of the value of the house can go to your heirs at law upon your passing. So Mass Health can place a lien on the property for services rendered, which lien would be paid back upon either the sale of the home or upon your passing, if it goes through probate, to the individual's estate. So residence is treated as non-countable asset. So say that you are not married and you are a single person, maybe your spouse is predeceased, maybe you've never married, and that you own the home yourself. There are some exceptions that the house can be treated as a non-countable asset. So the applicant owns a long-term care insurance policy that complies with strict Mass Health requirements. So we're going to talk about having long-term care insurance as a way to finance your long-term care, whether it's in the home environment or whether it's in an institution. And any of the following persons live in the home with you. The applicant, so that would be the married exception, right? The applicant's spouse, a child under the age of 21, a disabled or blind child of any age. The disability does need to be designated by the federal government or the Commonwealth of Mass, state of New Hampshire, wherever state you're in, right? So the disability can't be something that is undiagnosed. So it has to be documented that there is a disability in order for this exception to work, for the house to be treated as a non-countable asset, which means you get to keep the asset. When I say it's non-countable, that's a very positive thing. It means you get to keep the asset and you don't need to liquidate it to pay for your nursing care. A relative who is dependent on the applicant, that person is living in the home. This next one is called a child caregiver exception, and it's a child who lived in the home for at least 2 years immediately before the applicant moved into the nursing home. And that child provided care that permitted the applicant to remain at home. The thinking behind that is that the child who has moved in with you or has always lived with you and has provided care, but for them living with you, you would have had to go to the skilled nursing facility and use government benefits to pay. So the government is going to reward you for not using their services by being able to transfer a home worth up to $1,071,000 to a child who has cared for you. One of the requirements of this exception is that you do need to have your level of care documented by your physician. And then the last exception is a sibling who has an equity interest in the home and has lived there for at least 1 year before the applicant moved into a nursing home. So For a married person, your house is exempt if only one of you needs to go into a skilled nursing facility. For a single person, then if you have a child under the age of 21, if you have a disabled or blind child of any age, if you have a relative who is dependent upon you and they are living at the home and have been living at the home, a child who lived in the home for at least the previous 2 years and is providing care that rises to the level that a doctor could give a note that, but for them living there, you would have had to have gone to a skilled nursing facility. And then, or a sibling who has an equity interest in the home, meaning that they're on the deed, they're an owner in the home, and has lived there for at least 1 year before you went into a nursing home. You cannot apply. So these are some mass health applications. So that's pretty much mass health in a nutshell of what you would need to do to qualify and what are some of the assets that you can keep and what other assets are non-countable, right, for getting approved on a Medicaid application. Now I want to talk about the application itself. So you can kind of get a sense of what would be involved with that. So you cannot apply for mass health long-term care services until you are medically eligible, till you need services. You should not apply until you are financially eligible, meaning you've gotten below that $157,000 threshold if you are a married couple, or the $2,000 threshold if you are a single individual. You can apply up to 3 months after services begin with retroactive coverage. So if you have a medical event and you've gone into the hospital, you've been in there for 3 days, and then you're going to go into rehab maybe for a few days, and then they say, you know, you're really not rehabable. We're going to turn you over into private pay for long-term care, or you're going to need to apply for mass health for long-term care coverage. So you could maybe, that could maybe take a month or 2 to do that, but you will at least be able to get retroactive coverage to the date that your private pay long-term care started. The 5-year look-back period starts on the day you begin services, right? The day that you're asking the government to step in and pay for your services. And I'll go into the 5-year look back period in a little bit. So, but that's when your 5-year look back starts. The application takes approximately 3 to 12 months to get approval. The application is approximately 25 pages long, and you must supply documents to support the dollar amounts asserted in the application. So anytime you write on the application that I have this bank account and this is how much money it has in it, you need to supply at least the last 1 to 2 years of the bank account to show all money in and all money out of the bank account. They have the right to ask for the previous 5 years. That is that 5-year look back period. They are looking back over the previous 5 years from the day you've asked the government to step in and pick up your bill with mass health, right? They're going to look back 5 years to see if you've given away any money that you should have held on to, that you could now use to pay for your long-term care instead of asking the government to pay for it. And your application will be denied if you do not comply with the request for information on a timely basis, which is usually 30 days. So you submit your application, you've met all the requirements, we've gotten you under the $2,000 or the $157,000 limit. We've done the spend down to get you below those asset limits. Now the 5-year look back period kicks in, and you've submitted your 25-page application with usually about 100 to 200 pages of supporting documentation to give evidentiary proof that the things that you've written on the application are in fact true. And then your application gets reviewed by a caseworker. And normally within 30 to 60 days, the Mass Health application worker is sending you a list of this is the additional information we need to pass judgment on your application to either approve or deny you. And then that process continues to repeat itself every 30 to 60 days until Mass Health is satisfied with that they have all the information that they need and that you are either approved, and then they'll give you what date your approval went back to. Hopefully it is on that date that you converted maybe from rehab to long-term care and you asked for the government to step in and pick up your bill. And that if they have a problem that maybe you have gifted away money and they thought that, you know what, you gifted away $25,000, you helped your grandchild buy a car, but that they're going to say you really shouldn't have. So for every $12,000 approximately that you've gifted away, they're going to deny you coverage for 1 month. So in this case, for $25,000, right, you might be denied coverage for 2 to 3 months. So your start date that Mass Health is going to make you eligible for services, say if it was January 1st you were asking for, February, March, you might not be eligible for the government to pick up your tab until March 1st. So you need to continually respond to these requests for information. So let's talk about strategies to structure your assets, right? So if you're doing advanced planning, we're going to possibly consider purchasing long-term care insurance. I had a client who was 80 years old. She had $2 million in her estate. Her husband had predeceased her, and she wanted to protect the entire $2 million. So she opted at 80 years old to get a long-term care insurance policy that cost her $10,000 a year. Due to her advanced age, she was in good health. So she decided that it was a good bet to pay $200,000 over 20 years. She got the policy for 20 years. She was 80. She figured she'd get it until the age of 100 and spend $200,000 to protect $2 million. So that's kind of an extreme example of how purchasing long-term care insurance can aid you. Many people want to purchase long-term care insurance just for the simple fact that they don't want to do any Medicaid planning, right? That they don't even want to think about a government plan. So they're going to purchase enough long-term care insurance, or sometimes people just start to purchase whole life policies that have a lot of cash out value in the event they need to cash those out. But when you're going to do that, there's a lot of new hybrid policies out that are sometimes have a cash value element to it as well as a long-term care policy to it as well. So another advanced planning strategy. So again, when I say advanced planning, I'm saying that 5 years before you need a nursing home, you are working to reduce your estate so that it looks like when you do need nursing care, you have $157,000 as a married couple or $2,000 as an individual to qualify for long-term care, for the government to pay your bill on Mass Health. So we want to create and fund an irrevocable Medicaid asset protection trust. That's one option. And then we're going to create that Medicaid trust. We're going to put the assets that you want to protect and start the 5-year look back period into that trust so that before you apply for Mass Health long-term care, You started a look back period 5 years in advance or more. You've gotten through the 5-year look back period, and all of the assets, whether it is your home, $100,000 bank account, a brokerage account, is going to be seated in that Medicaid Asset Protection Trust. And we will have gotten through the 5-year look back period. So when you apply for benefits, you will be approved. You can also, instead of doing an irrevocable Medicaid Asset Protection Trust, you can start gifting your assets out of your name 5 years in advance of applying for benefits. Now, gifting is a little bit more difficult because you are totally divesting yourself of the asset. Your name is not on any bank account with your child. If you want to gift $100,000 or $1 million, whatever the amount is, even a house, if you want to gift that to your child, you have to divest yourself of that asset fully. If you don't want that asset to be included in the evaluation of whether you are going to qualify for long-term care or not, with MassHealth picking up the tab. So purchasing long-term care insurance, creating an irrevocable trust and funding it, or doing a gifting plan. But those last two are 5 years in advance of needing a nursing home. Now, many people come to us because they have not done the advance plan. So what is the emergency planning strategies? You can utilize a spousal immediate annuity to convert assets into an income stream. Remember when we first started talking about Medicaid planning, we had the income and then we had the asset columns. And I said that you can get qualified in a skilled nursing facility for the government to pick up your tab, and you can have as much income as possible, 5,000, 8,000, whatever, between your Social Security pension, your income streams, your required minimum distributions from your retirement assets. All of those things are going to be used to create an income stream. Well, we can take maybe a brokerage account, or we can even do planning in this case with retirement assets. And there's a specific type of annuity called an immediate annuity, and they are specifically used just for this purpose, to get you qualified for long-term care with the government picking up the bill by converting an asset into an income stream. Now, there's a lot of downside to doing this because the annuitant, or you, are named as the beneficiary of that annuity during your lifetime. But if you die before the annuity fully pays out, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts or any other state of New Hampshire as well, has to be named as the beneficiary of that annuity. So if there's any money left, that MassHealth is going to be the recipient of that money. So, but there are a lot of evaluations that are done when we're trying to figure out whether we're going to utilize a spousal immediate annuity. They're much too in-depth to go into in this presentation, but just so that you know that they're there. You can pay off your mortgage and other debts with any money you have if you need to do a spend down. You can make home improvements, especially if you're going to be aging in place. MassHealth will not penalize you for spending your money to make home improvements. New windows, ramps, new roofs, a whole new extension onto the house, anything that's going to improve the house. You can prepay your funeral expenses with an irrevocable funeral contract. Every funeral home knows what these are. You need to go to them and see them and prepay them. And purchase a vehicle. You're allowed to have on these plans one vehicle, and it doesn't even have to be for your use, but for someone else to drive that car for you. As a married couple, you're only allowed to have one vehicle exempt, and that they often require you to sell the other vehicle, and then that puts more money into the asset column. So then oftentimes if we have two older vehicles, I suggest that you sell both of the vehicles and then buy one nicer, more expensive vehicle to at least use up some of the money to do an emergency spend down of assets to get you below the $2,000 limit or the $157,000 limit we spoke about. The legal tools to safeguard your estate. An explanation of trust and some legal documents and the importance of guardianship for incapacity. This won't take nearly as long, so we'll try to get through that quickly. The essential legal documents that I want my clients to have in place: an irrevocable trust if you're going to do the Medicaid asset protection planning, or a revocable living trust to avoid probate, and at least get your assets in one place and have a trustee in charge of them in case you become incapacitated. The irrevocable trust is for Medicaid planning. The revocable trust is not, and I would like to emphasize, is not an asset protection Medicaid planning tool. A will, durable power of attorney, which is for finances, and I'd like you to have 3 documents: your healthcare, your HIPAA, and your advance directive. These are essential legal documents that anyone should have. So this is just a graphic depiction of those things. Your will, your trust is simply a container to hold things, and whether it's revocable or irrevocable depends upon the language in the trust. Your power of attorney controls finances. You always should have a power of attorney on file, because if you become incapacitated and either a surviving spouse or family member needs to liquidate some of your retirement money to pay for your care, they will not be able to do that unless you have a power of attorney on file at your retirement assets for them to then have the control to liquidate. And then here are those same 3 healthcare documents that I mentioned: the healthcare proxy, HIPAA, and the living will advance directive. Briefly, what is a trust? It's a container to hold things. It's a legal entity to hold your assets during your lifetime and distribute them after your passing or during your lifetime if you're the trustee, and without using the probate court system, though. So upon your passing, we're going to distribute everything in this trust to whomever you have named on this trust as the beneficiary. So that is how we avoid probate. If you have a trust and you don't have anything in it, nothing, it's not funded with anything, you will go to probate upon your passing. This specifically for this presentation is the Irrevocable Medicaid Asset Protection Trust. So here again, we have that same container, and you're going to transfer the assets you want to protect from the nursing home getting their hands on them into the trust. You use this to start the 5-year look-back period. Real estate, bank accounts, stocks, bonds, investment accounts, we do not transfer. We do not retitle. Transfer and retitle are synonymous when we're speaking about trusts. We are going to not transfer retirement assets into any trust because it will create a taxable event as if you're cashing out the entire retirement account. So if you want to do that to start protecting it from the 5-year look-back period, you can, but you need to be prepared to pay a heavy tax burden in the year that you have cashed out your retirement account. So instead, right, we're going to use this power of attorney to put on file with all retirement assets so that they can be used to privately pay for your care. We can use that immediate annuity I spoke about for retirement accounts. But oftentimes, depending upon how your irrevocable trust is drafted, you can name your irrevocable trust as the beneficiary of your retirement assets. If you have a surviving spouse, we oftentimes will name the surviving spouse and then your trust, or the surviving spouse and then your heirs at law or your children. If you create the irrevocable trust, there are some negatives. You must create it 5 years in advance. It's irrevocable. It cannot be changed. You are not the trustee. You are not the principal beneficiary, and you cannot use the trust assets to pay for your needs or your care, such as you cannot use it to pay for an assisted living. And any income you receive as an income beneficiary is not protected from a nursing home grabbing it. So if you put $1 million in this irrevocable trust and you get income of, say, $10,000 a year, that $10,000 is going to be put into the income column that we started with when we were talking about Medicaid. And it's going to be used to pay for your care. But some positives about a Medicaid asset protection trust. The assets transferred into the trust start the 5-year look-back period. You are the income beneficiary, so people like that they're going to get $10,000 on the million every year. You can change the principal beneficiaries till the day you die by changing your will. This is a loophole in Medicaid planning. So even though you can't change a lot of things on the irrevocable trust, and you can't get at the principal, you can get at the income, but you can also change the beneficiary. So if you have 5 children and you've named all of them as the beneficiaries, and one of them becomes addicted to a substance and you don't think that they're trustworthy with the money and you don't want to leave it to them outright, or a person that you as a beneficiary is disabled, we can then change the distributions in your will to cut that person out, and then maybe create a special needs trust in your will or standalone to then receive those assets. Principal beneficiaries inherit assets at your death, at your date of death value, giving them an advantageous step up in tax basis. And after 5 years, trust assets are protected from a nursing home. The other thing was the durable power of attorney. A durable power of attorney allows you to appoint someone you trust to manage your finances. During your capacity and or your incapacity, that person is referred to as your attorney, in fact. Before you do a mass health application, they're going to want you to have a durable power of attorney and submit it. If you don't, they're likely going to want you to go to court to get a conservator of the person appointed to handle financial matters and pay the bills. They're going to want you to have a healthcare proxy as well. A healthcare proxy gives a designated person, your healthcare proxy or your agent, the authority to make healthcare decisions on your behalf. This only takes place if you lack capacity. Where your power of attorney can be used whether you have capacity or not for convenience, say, but this can only be used for on your incapacity. And if you have a healthcare proxy in place, you don't need to have someone go to court to be appointed your guardian to make healthcare decisions for you. And to pretty much wrap this up, we're going to go into the final financial planning for long-term care. This has a lot on it, but it's really just 5 top of the mind things I want you to think about. Plan ahead with insurance. Consider long-term care insurance to cover future expenses. Look into the hybrid life insurance policies I mentioned with long-term care benefits associated with them. I want you to understand the difference between Medicaid and Medicare. Medicaid is really a welfare-based system. It is for people that are impoverished. So if you want to use mass health Medicaid for long-term care, you have to impoverish yourself on paper. Versus Medicare is a program offered by the federal government, implemented at the state level, and it takes care of your health care, and it also covers, in many cases, rehabilitation hospitals. So if you're on rehab, you're under Medicare, and if you're on a skilled nursing facility, long-term care, you're on Medicaid or private pay. So Medicaid covers, as it says here, nursing home, but it has strict asset limits, the 2,000, the 157, and then Medicare offers limited coverage for skilled nursing and home health care. I want you to establish a financial plan. Create a savings fund specifically for long-term care. Work with a financial advisor to explore annuities. Reverse mortgages are also, they have a bad rap, but if you're in your home and you don't have any money to either go to an assisted living and you want to stay in your home, This is the prime reason why people get reverse mortgages. They take the value of their home and they turn it into cash so that they can then pay for care to come into the home environment. Now, you have to square away the reverse mortgage upon your passing or upon you deciding that you are going to be selling the home. If you haven't used up all of the value of the reverse mortgage, then you just have to satisfy with the reverse mortgage and you get the rest of the money back. But many of my clients have gotten a reverse mortgage, used have a line of credit for the value of it, use it to pay for in-home care. And then in addition to that, when they pass away, they oftentimes have used up the full value of the reverse mortgage, but they can still remain there in the home until they pass away. Leverage tax advantages. If you have the health savings accounts for qualified expenses, you should be using that to pay for your long-term care costs. If you have the ability to maximize those, it's a great way to use tax-free dollars to pay for your care. Claim tax deductions for certain medical and care-related expenses. If you have to liquidate your retirement money for your care, you need to claim the corresponding tax deductions so that you really will not get a big tax hit when you are going to liquidate your retirement to pay for your care. And set up your legal protections. Use trust to safeguard assets and to qualify for benefits, and have a durable power of attorney to manage your finances in case of emergencies. To wrap it up, contact an attorney and get your legal documents in order while you have capacity. That is extremely important while you have capacity. Cannot tell you that I just had a client that had called to have it done. We were ready to sign, and a week before, they had a stroke. And we couldn't do their durable power of attorney and their healthcare proxy. So I can't urge you enough to get at least your cornerstone documents, even if you don't do a trust, a will, durable power of attorney, healthcare proxy, HIPAA, advanced directive. It's about $1,000 to have it done for an individual. I highly recommend it. If you needed long-term care now, what would it look like? Where would it take place? Who would provide it to you? How much would it cost? I want you to think about this, and I want you to start taking some steps to planning for it now. And I want you to think that if you had a medical event yesterday and went to rehab and they said, you're not making enough progress, Medicare is stopping, and you're either private paying or going to the government plan, what would you do? I want you to start thinking, how are you going to pay for your long-term care if needed? If you are relying on the government plan to provide your long-term care, start the 5-year look-back period planning now for asset protection. The things I said were gifting, irrevocable trust. Work with your financial advisor and your insurance professionals to discuss long-term care planning options and also how you might be able to finance it. Some people with enough assets really do look at say, like, do I even want to enter the realm of long-term care planning? Many clients at that point will either decide to self-pay or will spend some of their money to get long-term care insurance so that there is enough money that they're never going to have to touch their assets. If you need advanced or emergency long-term care planning, you should be contacting a qualified elder law attorney now to assist you with the process, especially the spend down process, to help you evaluate if you have violated the 5-year look back period of getting assets out of your name to qualify, so that we can maybe try to work out a plan to cure those disqualifying transfers and to get you qualified, to see if maybe one of the exceptions work so that you don't even have to worry about doing any extreme planning and still qualify for the government plan. or to submit a long-term care mass health application. That concludes the presentation. Thank you. We do offer a $500 long-term care planning consultation for up to 1.5 hours to all attendees. To take advantage of that, all you have to do is mention this offer when you email office@guthrolaw.com and request a questionnaire from us. The questionnaire can either be an estate planning questionnaire if you're not on the brink of doing Medicaid planning, or if you're on the brink of emergency planning, then request a long-term care questionnaire, and that we can do, cap a consultation at $500. So at this point, I'm going to get off of the screen share in a moment. I have a couple of questions that people often ask. Question number one: if I transfer my house into an irrevocable Medicaid asset protection trust, can I sell the house and use the proceeds for an assisted living facility? That is a big no, because you have divested yourself of all of the assets, money, home, whatever is in that Medicaid irrevocable trust. You can get at the income, but you cannot get at the asset specifically. What are the top 3 estate planning documents you should have for long-term care planning if you will rely on the Medicaid Mass Health government plan? You should have your healthcare proxy in place. You should have a durable power of attorney for finances in place. And if you want an irrevocable Medicaid trust to at least start the 5-year look-back period on assets, unless you fall under one of the exceptions that we had mentioned on the exception to the 5-year look-back period and the Medicaid asset protection trust. So I'll stop the share. I'll go to the chat. So let's see, I'll go to the top. How do we determine if our long-term care policy, Genworth, complies with Massachusetts health requirements? You should reach out to Genworth. They should know what the requirements are, and say that you want confirmation. And if your policy isn't up to snuff, then you would like to modify the policy to make it compliant, or get a new policy in addition to that one, or stop that one and get a new one. How does the government treat assets if the house still has a mortgage? Does the 5-year look back apply if the applicant has in trust all assets? First part of that is, how does the government treat assets if the house still has a mortgage? If 2 people are alive, the house is an exempt asset, whether or not it has a mortgage. And it's exempt up to $1,071,000 in equity. So that's a neutral event, having a mortgage or not. If you're an individual and you have a house with a mortgage and you qualify for mass health, they're going to ask you to eventually sell the house. And then at the time of sale, the mortgage will be paid. And then any remaining money will be used to make mass health whole for any assets that they have transferred to you, used on your behalf. Does the 5-year look back apply if the applicant has in trust all assets? They would have to have it in the irrevocable trust, and the 5-year look back period from the day you transfer each asset into the trust starts its own 5-year look back period. So if 6 years ago you transferred your real estate into the irrevocable trust, and today it's 6 years, the house got through the 5-year look back period. Say 4 years ago you transferred a $100,000 bank account into the trust. That did not make it through the 5-year look back period. That would be considered a countable asset, and it did not make it through the 5-year protection period. Lori says, do you say the Medicaid review looks at all your financial institution records for 3 years back or 5 years back? 5 years. Please explain how a Medicare irrevocable trust would work. You create the container. And in that container, you then fund the container, and that starts the 5-year look back period for whatever assets you put in that container. And then on the trust, you are not the trustee, so you're not in charge. You choose someone else to be in charge of the trust, normally a child, friend, trustee, and then you name beneficiaries. You and or your spouse are named as the income beneficiaries. Normally, your heirs at law, your children or charities are named as your principal beneficiaries. And now you have to wait to get through the 5-year look back period. Once you get through the 5-year look back period, sometimes we put language in the trusts that allows you to distribute assets after the 5-year to your named beneficiaries, principal beneficiaries. But the cleanest irrevocable trust is this. You create the trust. You're not the trustee. I'll use an example of a married couple with children, and that you start the 5-year look back period on the house, say, and then after, and you name your children as the principal beneficiaries, and you and your spouse are named as the income beneficiaries. The house doesn't generate any income, so there's no income that's going to be paid out, so there's no need to get a tax ID number for the trust. 5 years goes by. Maybe you want to then transfer the house out of the trust and give it to the children outright. You can do that, but that is what we don't like. We like for you to just put whatever assets into that irrevocable trust, divest yourself of it, and then the assets stay untouched until the last of you dies. And then upon that, it is then distributed to the principal beneficiaries. If you have a trust like that and you get through the 5-year look back period, it will be successful under a Medicaid asset protection review, Medicaid application review. That was Carol's question. Kathy's question is, how can we find a qualified trustee? So a qualified trustee normally is a sibling. If I know Kathy has special needs child, and that would not be someone that could assist Kathy. So we would be looking elsewhere. We would either be going to a trusted sibling, a trusted niece or nephew. There are professional trustees that you can hire. I've seen them fall into two categories. One that charges for the amount of assets that are under or funded into your trust. So a house, it's not really very liquid, but if you get a trust company that they're really looking for $1 million in investable assets that they're now going to manage for the benefit of a disabled child, and that they're going to serve as the trustee. There are also special trustees that are connected with pooled trust companies that allow them to be the trustees because they know all of the rules of how to distribute assets to a supplemental needs child or individual to not disturb their public benefits. So we could ask a professional trustee to do that, and that they're normally oftentimes nonprofit organizations. So any fee that they would take is often used for nonprofit purposes. Or there are some attorneys, I'm not one of them, that do serve as trustees, professional trustees, and they charge on an hourly basis for services rendered. And they normally charge you when you meet to set everything up, and that they would like an annual meeting with you at an hourly fee as well to just check in with you, see how things have changed, if your intentions have changed, or, just to check in, to keep an ongoing relationship. Elizabeth, if you only have a will and not a trust, do you go to probate if one of the persons passes? So that depends on how each individual asset you own is titled, Elizabeth. If you have a joint bank account and two people are on it, and one of them passes away, because it's a joint bank account, the surviving joint owner receives the entire account. But once that joint owner dies, and you don't have anyone listed as a beneficiary designated on that account, you're going to probate. If you have a house and 2 people are on it, 1 person dies. If you hold the deed as joint tenants with rights of survivorship, the survivor gets it. If you hold the house as, but then again, same situation as the bank account, when that surviving joint owner dies, you're going to probate. And then we're going to use your will to determine who gets it next. So we're opening up probate. A caveat on a deed: if you own property as tenants in common, not as tenants, joint tenants with rights of survivorship, that means that maybe you and a sibling own a house together. Your half of the house that you own is going to go to your heirs at law, and it's going to go to probate. That's why a lot of people that own deeds, real estate with siblings, they put their half into their trust. Their sibling can put their half in their trust. So you could have 2 trusts owning a deed. Or you could have 1 trust that the 2 siblings are both the trustees, and you have it stated who gets what after the last of you dies, or on the first of you dying. So that answer, Elizabeth, is really asset specific. And beneficiary designations, right? That's another form like a bank account. But if you have a CD, you can avoid probate by naming beneficiaries. But you want to be very careful that you're naming beneficiaries that are alive. Because if that beneficiary predeceases you, then that CD is going to have to go to probate and look to the will to determine who gets the CD. When I create trusts and you tell me who you want to get the asset, I say, who gets it if they die? And then I say, and if they die, who gets it? Like, I go out 3 gyrations. I want a plan because I can't tell you the scenarios that I see, right? And the goal, even in naming beneficiaries on assets, if you're not going to do a trust and you are going to use a will, but you want to avoid probate, is to name beneficiaries. Now, if your beneficiary, if you have a special needs person in your life, an individual or a child, you really do want to set up a special needs trust. And then you want to name, especially on retirement assets, that special needs trust as the beneficiary of your retirement assets. So that's how you're pushing the care and providing for a special needs individual with retirement assets. Are you covered by Medicare with the word care at the end of it, right? That's not the welfare program. This is the healthcare program by the federal government. Are you covered by Medicare for up to 60 or 90 days before supplemental insurance should kick in? I'm going to take a leap on this one and say that you're saying that you are in the hospital for 3 days, not under observation, but you've been admitted. This is a very, very important fact for a lot of coverages. In the hospital, event, admitted for 3 days minimum, transferred to a rehab for rehabilitation services. Medicare covers the first 100 days of care. They cover the first 20 days 100%. And then they have a copay for the 21 through 50 days. And then they have a different copay for 50 to 51 through 75, I think. And then they have a different copay for 76 through 100. And those categories could have changed, right? But just know, first 20 are free. And after that, you have a copay. And that is when, depending upon what supplemental plan you have, determines if you're going to have to pay privately that copay or whether your supplemental plan is going to pick it up. Right? So when you're picking your supplemental plans for Medicare, take a look, know what they are paying, especially if you anticipate even rehabs, even if you go in for a knee replacement, body part replacement, right? You're going to rehab. What is going to be your financial liability on the rehab? Now, if you are likely to turn from Medicare, rehab, hospital to the rehab, they've got you covered for the first 20 days. I see this oftentimes with stroke victims that are really disabled. And then in that 20 days that Medicare has got you covered, you're going to start feeling a lot of pushback on day 15. They're going to say, you're not making much progress. You're really not very rehabable. You're not participating in your rehab. So they're going to call a family meeting and they're going to tell you that you need to start making arrangements for long-term care, either private pay or mass health. So they're not even going to even entertain you on day 21. You're going to be cut off of Medicare and switch to Medicaid or private pay. So let me know if LH if that does not answer your question. David, what is the use of the 5-year look-back period? The 5-year look-back period is what we use to protect assets. In the event you go into a nursing home and you don't want to have to liquidate all of your assets to privately pay $15,000 a month for your care in the nursing home. So if you either gift money away, create an irrevocable trust, and fund that trust with assets to start the 5-year look-back period, go and buy a long-term care insurance policy so you're not even caring. You're not going to have to use your own money. But the 5-year look-back period, David, states that if you want to privately pay, you don't have to worry about any 5-year look-back period. You're just paying. But many people want to plan 5 years in advance, which none of us have a crystal ball, right? We don't know when that 5 years actually starts. But I said earlier, it actually starts on the day you start asking for long-term care coverage by the government. Soon as they have to start paying $15,000 a month, that's when your 5-year look back starts. And they're not looking forward at what you're doing. They're looking back in time. They're going to ask you for 5 years of bank statements. And what are they looking for? Did you gift away $100,000 to one of your children 3 years ago? Oh, did you buy this grandchild a car and you got $30,000 out? Did you know that you were like getting sick and you had started to have a dementia diagnosis and you thought that you had 5 years to get through before you needed to be in a skilled nursing facility full time? So you gave all of your assets and your house away to your children? If they see that, David, within the 5 years of bank statements, they're going to say, you better cure those transfers, get your house back, get those bank accounts back, and you're going to use that money to privately pay for your care at $15,000 a month. And when you spent through all that money, and as an individual, you're down to $2,000, or as a married couple, you're down to $157,000, then we'll pick up your $15,000 a month. But before that, we're not picking it up. Maybe that answered your question. So if anybody wants to come off mute, we're going to wrap up in about 5 minutes. So if anybody has an additional question that they might like to ask verbally, or if you want to put it in the chat, I'm happy to address anything. Also, if you could just even put in the chat if there was any one thing that you took away as something that was surprising to you. Because I do a lot of volunteer work at the Council on Aging, and I really like to kind of make sure I hit some top points with people that maybe you can't think about all of this. And I understand you have been drinking from a fire hose for the last hour, right? There's a lot going on here. But that if I can at least get you thinking about one, what is long-term care? What gate do you have to open to even have to worry about it? Then what are the costs? What are the settings that you can receive it in? What do you want? How do you want to be cared for? Who do you want to be cared for? And then talk about many people want the government plan. And if you want the government plan, you've got to do the 5-year look back planning now for 5 years. So we're November 20th, 2024. On November 21st, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, if you started protecting your assets today, you cannot go into a nursing home and ask the government to pick up your plan, pay for your care before November 21st, 2029. That's a specific example of the 5-year look back, right? But if you had one of those exceptions that we talked about earlier, maybe you don't need to do any planning at all. But I'm here as an elder law attorney. If you do need help, this normally is a billable consult. So hopefully you have gotten what you need from this, and that if you do need services, we'd be happy to assist you, and you can simply contact our office, take advantage of the promo, which is a discounted rate. And thank you very much all for joining me. Appreciate it.
If you would like help or have questions about this information, please give us a call at 781-229-0555 or visit our website at guthrolaw.com. We look forward to hearing from you.